Hey friends, it's a chilly winter day out here, but I'm still soaking up some rays anyway. It's a beautiful day. I thought it'd be really fun to video log what our fig tree has done this year so that we can share that with you, because there's so many steps involved. We've learned a lot over the years. 5 years ago, we bought this little tiny twig at a plant sale, and it was going to grow into a fig tree, we hoped, with lots and lots of figs, and it has done really well. But we've also learned a ton about what to do, not only at harvest time, but after harvest time. What does that plant, that bush, want at the end of the season so that it will store its reserves and its energy up for the next year and continue to grow more and more abundance. So we have done really well with ours. I'm super proud of Dan for all of it he's learned. We canned the last several batches of the figs that came in after eating lots and lots of them fresh. So stick with us here. I'm going to show you the video log of what we did this fall and at the beginning of the winter with our fig tree.
Hey everybody, today I'd like to talk about this fig tree here behind me, one of my favorite things on the whole property. Now this fig started out, believe it or not, as just a little twig, just a couple of feet high, and now, well, you can see behind me, gets about 12 to 20 feet high. You can let it go about 20 feet wide, and it has figs all over it in the late summer and early fall. I've learned a lot about figs, and I've learned how to take care of this fig tree specifically. And if you're new to figs, or you're interested maybe in the near future of propagating some figs and maybe getting some of your own produce, I'd love to teach you right now how to do that. Now it's the end of the season, and so most of the figs have ripened and already been harvested. You can see that I've got a couple of more that are just kind of late comers on the plant itself. Those won't probably ripen. In fact, you can see we're getting some cold nights, and we can see a little bit of erosion here on the leaves where they're starting to wilt. Figs do not like low temperatures. Typically when it gets down to 35 or lower, even before it gets down to freezing, they're gonna start dying off. And so in a couple of days, I expect that the temperatures at night will get low enough where this plant will start dying off, and then I'll show you exactly what I do to prep it for the winter into next spring.
October and November were warmer than usual, so we just piled up leaves at the base and let it be.
All right, today is the day. It is time to prune our fig. It's a beautiful day outside, but we have had a cold stretch, and that's why you don't see any leaves on this anymore. The leaves have fallen off. Some of the unripe fruit is still hanging here, and it'll just pop right off. Our goal today is to go ahead and winterize the fig. Now, keep in mind that figs are a little different than other fruits in the sense that these plants don't really like cold temperatures. The chill hours aren't as necessary for figs as other plants. When it gets below 35 degrees Fahrenheit, you're gonna start seeing the leaves wilt, they'll die off, the fruit will dry up that's unripe. And below 30 degrees, you're going to start seeing the twigs start to dry up, and you will have to protect the base because they're really sensitive, below 25 degrees especially, to potentially dying, being destroyed by the cold. So notice that I've gone ahead and I've heaped up some leaves here. That will help in the meantime before I fully winterize the plant. Let's go ahead and winterize it right now. Now my fig here is actually 4 different trunks. The original one, the mother if you will, was the one way over there in the back next to the fence, and the other 3 have actually propagated from what's called stool layering, and that's when these outside branches, twigs, come really close to the ground. This is a really good example here. You see how close to the ground that is, and it actually is touching here, and it will root right there, and it'll create a new trunk in this area unless I cut it back farther. And so I've allowed a couple of them to propagate that way. You'll want to keep in mind that when you cut the twigs, the thinner twigs that are on the outside of this vase shape, if you will, you need to cut them awfully short. The bigger ones that are toward the inside, you can cut them down below a foot, 8 to 10 inches, 12 inches. It doesn't really matter so much, just enough so that you can keep them low and so that they can then shoot from that twig next year, because next spring, that's where the growth is going to be. This is actually a live branch right here, and it's died a little bit toward the end, so that's why I'm cutting it back. We'll go ahead and take all of these twigs off, and we'll stack them, and we'll actually use them for the winterizing process. Our cuts are now complete. You notice that there's some fresh cuts right here on some of the center twigs. These are last year's cuts and they've healed over. There's no need to do any wound care on these. They'll take care of themselves, unlike other fruit trees that sometimes you have to do some wound care. This is actually pretty deep. This pile of leaves is about 10 inches, so there's definitely some stump there. This one is a little more buried, but this is what you want. You want it to be protected by the leaves or the straw or whatever you put on there. Remember that the center bigger stems are about 8, 10, 12 inches in length. And then the ones that are the outside, the ones that would tend to want to propagate new plants, the thinner ones, you want to cut those back to about 1 or 2 inches from the base at most, so that they don't create and propagate new plants. Of course, if you want them to, you certainly can do that as well. We're ready now for the next step. I have collected all of the twigs from these 4 plants. We're going to actually use them for the winterizing process. Now, when you cut them off of the plants, it's fine to use a handheld chainsaw or a small pruning saw or something like that. I would really recommend, though, in this next step, to have yourself a pair of pruning loppers like I used earlier. It's a lot easier to cut these, and what you need to do is actually cut these in half. You want them to be about 2 feet in length, because we're going to take all of these branches and we're going to put them around each of the trunks like a teepee. It will help protect and winterize the plants, and as well, it will give some nutrition as they start decomposing during the winter. It's interesting, we think of the forest and we think of all those leaves and those branches that fall down, and they fall down around the trunks of the trees, etc. Those actually create some of the best soil that's available, some of the best mulch that's available. We don't go in and we don't rake the forest, right? But the way God has set it up, He set it up so that all the nutrients that are in these leaves and fallen twigs, etc., are able to give nutrition to the plants themselves. So now I have created my little teepee of all these twigs. You see that it doesn't create a perfect wall to insulate the plants for the winter, but it does help a little bit. And again, these twigs are going to decay a little bit through the winter and create a little bit more nourishment for the plants. If you live in a warmer climate like we do here, it's not even really necessary to add this final layer. We could be fine with just the leaves and the twigs. However, I like to put an extra layer on just in case for those extended periods of time to get in the low 20s and in the teens at night. If you have extended periods of teens, for sure you'll want this last step. Now, what you want to do is you want to add a layer of something else. I recommend either straw or cardboard, or you can, in very cold climates, use a tarp and then affix it around the edges with stones or bricks or something like that. What you don't want to use on this last step is compost or wood chips or mulch, because too much compacted stuff around these stumps will actually start rotting them. Arborists say that you never want to have a lot of compost right around your tree trunk. You always want to have that little divot. And this is kind of the idea we have here. We want things on top, but things that are light and loose, and not things that will create rot. So if you choose the option for the straw as a covering and an insulation for the winter, you want to go ahead and just loosely lay it on there. One benefit of doing straw is that water from the winter rains and early spring will get down in there, and you will tend to have your fig come to life a little more quickly and without any really maintenance or babysitting of it. So if you choose the cardboard option, it's really simple. Just collect cardboard through the year. It's the same cardboard that you'd use to winterize your raised beds, and just lay it over the center trunk. Notice that I've even punctured with one of the twigs so that it stays real nice. It gets damp very quickly. It decays very quickly. Make sure to use cardboard that's not too colored, not too much tape on it, stuff like that. You want it to be kind of raw, and it will decay, probably be gone by the spring. Again, just like the straw, it's really nice because that allows a little bit of that water, the winter and early spring rains, to get through. The last option is the tarp. Again, if you live in a colder climate, this might be the way you want to go. I've done it one time and it worked out fine. One thing you do have to remember though with the tarp is that it doesn't allow the water to come through. So just after the last freeze or frost of the spring, you want to make sure to take the tarp off so that the water can start getting through and causing your plant to rejuvenate for the spring. You're really looking at about a mid-May type of time frame before you'll see a lot of life in your fig. So don't worry about it, because it winterizes for a very long time and it likes warm weather. So in closing, you might ask the question, why do this in the first place? You may know somebody who has fig trees that they don't prune at all, they don't winterize, or maybe you do that yourself. Well, I've found that this is a proven method in order to help your yield the next year. It's more abundant yield, bigger fruit, and thicker branches. And that's the important thing, is you don't want to have a tree that's growing, a bush that's growing really big with a lot of gangly, thin, unproductive branches. And so you can make sure of that by cleaning this out every winter season. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for joining.